I chose the right road, even if it was the hardest one. We were no longer a broken family, we were a rebuilt family. And sometimes rebuilt things are stronger than the original ones. And I was holding my phone in my hand staring at a message that did not make sense. And yet it felt like it explained everything I had been feeling for years. The message said, "Hello, I am married to your husband. And I think you deserve to know the truth." My heart started pounding so hard that my ears rang and my fingers went numb. I was standing in the parking lot outside the grocery store with bags of milk and bread sitting in my cart. And the world around me kept moving like nothing had happened while my entire life froze in place. I read the message again and again, hoping my eyes were lying to me, hoping my mind was playing some cruel trick on me. But the words stayed the same, and my chest felt tight like I could not get enough air. My name is Laura Benson, and until that moment I believed I had a normal, simple American family life. I lived in a small town in Indiana, where everyone knew everyone and kids rode bikes until the street lights came on. My husband Mark worked in electrical maintenance and traveled to different states for big projects. He was gone a lot, but he always said he was working hard for our future. We had 2 kids, Katie, who was 11, and Ryan, who was 7. Our mornings were busy with cereal bowls and school backpacks. Our evenings were full of homework checks and family dinners. Mark would call every night when he was away and tell the kids good night and tell me he loved me. But over the past few years I had started feeling something was not right. Mark became distant. He started locking his phone. He would step outside to take calls, and his voice would get low and quiet. When I asked him what was wrong, he would say he was tired or stressed from work. That message in the parking lot opened a door I never wanted to see behind. I slowly typed back asking who the woman was and what she meant. She replied that her name was Michelle, and she lived in Tennessee, and she had been married to Mark for almost 4 years. She said she thought I was his ex-wife who would not leave him alone. I felt like I was watching my life fall apart in slow motion. I sat in my car and cried until my eyes burned and my head hurt. The kids were waiting at home for dinner, and I did not know how I was supposed to walk through that door and pretend everything was normal. That night after I put the kids to bed, I called Michelle, and we talked for a long time. She cried and apologized even though she had done nothing wrong. She told me Mark had met her on a job site and told her he was divorced. She told me they had an apartment together and celebrated holidays together, and even had a wedding certificate framed in their bedroom. She sent me pictures and my hands shook as I scrolled through them. I saw my husband smiling in another living room, sitting on another couch holding another woman like she was his only wife. When Mark came home a few days later, I could barely look at him. I laid my phone on the kitchen table and told him I knew everything. He tried to deny it at first. He said Michelle was lying. He said she was confused. But when I played a voice message of him telling her he loved her, his shoulders dropped, and he sank into a chair. He said he never meant to hurt anyone. He said he was lonely on the road. He said he loved us both in different ways, and did not know how to let go of either life. I screamed and cried until my voice was gone. My hands shook and my heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. I told him to leave, and when he tried to touch me, I pulled away like he had burned me. The kids cried when he packed his bag. Katie asked what she did wrong. Ryan asked if Daddy was mad at him. I hugged them and told them this was not their fault while my own heart shattered inside my chest. The days that followed felt empty and quiet. I cried in the shower. I cried in my car. I cried late at night when the kids were asleep. The house felt colder without his boots by the door and his coffee mug on the counter. Michelle and I kept talking. She left him too. We were both victims of the same lies, and we slowly helped each other heal. I found a job at a small clothing store in town. I learned how to pay the bills myself. I learned how to be strong when I felt broken. Katie became quieter for a while. Ryan became angry for a while, but slowly they started smiling again. We created new routines: Friday movie nights, Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday walks around the neighborhood. Months later, Mark tried to come back. He said he was sorry. He said he had changed, but I realized that apologies do not rebuild trust, and words do not erase betrayal. I chose peace. I chose truth. I chose my children and my self-respect over a man who chose lies. Sometimes the person you love the most becomes the lesson that saves your future, and sometimes losing someone is the only way you finally find yourself. Time did not move the same after Mark left our house. Every day felt longer than the last, and every night felt heavier than the one before. I would lie awake listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant sound of cars passing on Main Street, wondering how a life that felt so real could disappear so quickly. The kids would still wake up early for school, and I would still make their lunches and braid Katie's hair and tie Ryan's shoes, but everything felt different, like the air in our home had changed. The walls felt quieter, the mornings felt colder. Some days I would find myself staring at Mark's empty chair at the kitchen table. Without even realizing I was doing it, I would remember the way he used to joke about my cooking or complain about how strong I made my coffee, and suddenly my chest would feel tight again. Katie started asking hard questions. She wanted to know if her dad ever loved us. She wanted to know if he was coming back. She wanted to know why people lie to the ones they promised to protect. I would sit on the edge of her bed at night and hold her hand and tell her that sometimes people are broken in ways we cannot fix. Ryan became more quiet. He stopped asking to play catch in the backyard. He started staying inside, drawing pictures of our family the way it used to be and taping them on his bedroom wall. I would find those drawings late at night and cry silently, so he would not hear me. I tried to stay strong for them, but there were moments when the weight of everything would catch up to me. One afternoon while folding laundry, I suddenly sank down on the floor with a pile of warm clothes in my lap and sobbed until my whole body shook. My sister came to visit one weekend and she found me sitting on the couch staring at nothing. She made me tea and sat beside me and told me that losing someone you trusted feels like losing part of yourself. She said healing does not mean forgetting, it means learning how to live with the scars. Slowly I began to change my routines. I started walking in the evenings around our block. I would wave at neighbors and feel the cool air on my face. It was a small thing, but it helped me breathe again. I started going to a small support group at the community center, where other women shared their stories. Some had lost husbands to affairs, some to addiction, some to secrets. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone. Michelle and I continued talking. She told me about how she found out the truth, and how her heart broke the same way mine did. We were strangers brought together by the same betrayal, but we became a quiet source of strength for each other. One night Michelle told me she had finally removed the framed wedding certificate from her bedroom wall and put it in a drawer. She said she felt like she was finally closing a painful chapter of her life. I cried for her, and for myself, because I knew exactly what that felt like. As months passed, my heart slowly began to feel lighter, not healed, but lighter. I started laughing again at small things. I started feeling hopeful again in quiet moments. I realized that even though Mark had taken years of my life with him, he did not get to take my future. I still had my children. I still had my strength. I still had the chance to build something honest and real. I was no longer the woman who waited for phone calls and believed excuses. I was becoming a woman who trusted her instincts and protected her peace. One morning I woke up before the kids and sat at the small kitchen table watching the sun come through the thin curtains. I had not realized how long it had been since I had felt calm in the early mornings. The house was quiet, and for the first time in a long while that quiet did not feel empty, it felt peaceful. I made coffee and sat there thinking about the woman I used to be, the woman who believed every promise, the woman who waited by the phone counting the days until her husband came home. I felt sadness for her, but I also felt pride because she survived something that could have completely destroyed her. Katie started doing better in school again. Her teacher called me one afternoon to say she was participating in class and smiling more. Ryan started asking to play catch again in the evenings, and his laughter slowly returned to our backyard. One evening after dinner, Katie looked at me and asked if love always ends in pain. I took a deep breath and told her that love is not supposed to hurt you all the time, and that real love feels safe and kind. She nodded quietly, like she was storing those words deep in her heart. Mark stopped calling as often. The silence that once scared me now felt like a sign that I was finally moving forward. I no longer checked my phone hoping to see his name. I was learning how to live without waiting for him. I started saving small amounts of money in an envelope tucked into a drawer. It made me feel independent. It made me feel like I was building something for myself and my children. Michelle sent me a message one night, saying she was starting a new job and moving to a smaller place closer to her sister. She said she finally felt like she was getting her life back. I smiled when I read her message because I could feel my own heart getting stronger too. The pain had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled me. It had become part of my story, not the end of it. I began to understand that healing is not loud. It does not come with fireworks or big moments. It comes quietly in small steps and calm mornings and peaceful nights. Spring slowly turned into summer, and the air in our little town felt lighter. The trees filled out again, and kids rode bikes down our street in the evenings. Katie started helping me cook dinner, and Ryan started racing his friends on their scooters, and every small normal moment felt like a victory. One afternoon I was standing in line at the local grocery store when I heard someone say my name. It was an old neighbor who had moved back into town. She hugged me and told me she was sorry about everything that had happened. I did not feel embarrassed or ashamed the way I once would have. I simply thanked her, and realized how much stronger I had become. Later that night I sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea watching the sky turn orange and purple, and I felt a quiet happiness settle into my chest. It was not the loud kind of happiness I used to imagine, but it was steady and real. Ryan ran up to me and asked if we could go camping one day like we used to. I told him yes, and promised we would make new memories even if they looked different from the old ones. Katie started writing in a small journal she kept under her pillow one night. She let me read a page where she wrote that she wanted to grow up and be strong like me. I had to turn away to wipe my tears, because I never thought my broken moments would become someone else's inspiration. Mark tried to reach out again near the holidays. He sent a message saying he was lonely and missed the kids. I felt my heart tighten. But I also felt something new, clarity. I replied kindly, but firmly, that our life had moved forward, and that we were building something new and healthy. I realized that healing does not mean forgetting. It means choosing not to live inside the pain anymore. It means choosing your peace again and again. Every small step I took away from the lies brought me closer to the life I truly deserved. Over the next few months I started noticing the little things that made life feel full again. The smell of fresh bread baking at the local bakery on Main Street, the sound of birds singing outside the kitchen window in the mornings, the way Katie would laugh at something silly Ryan said while racing around the yard. Even the hum of the old refrigerator at night felt comforting in a way I never realized before. I began volunteering at the elementary school library once a week. It gave me a sense of purpose beyond the walls of my own home. I loved helping the kids find books, and seeing their faces light up when they discovered a story they loved. I started connecting with other parents, and slowly my circle of support grew. One Saturday morning as we were driving to the park, Katie asked me if I ever thought I would be happy again. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and said, I think happiness is something you build little by little, and sometimes it comes from the smallest moments, like a walk in the park or a shared laugh at the dinner table. Ryan chimed in from the back seat saying he wanted to build a treehouse, and I promised him we would start planning it next weekend. The excitement in their voices reminded me that life was still moving forward even after the storm. I started keeping a journal of my own. I wrote about the pain, the betrayal, the nights I cried alone, and the moments I felt powerless. But I also wrote about the victories, the small victories, the quiet mornings, the laughter of my children, and the moments when I felt my strength returning. Michelle and I stayed in touch. She had moved closer to her sister and was slowly rebuilding her life too. We would exchange messages about our struggles and our small victories, and sometimes we would just sit on video calls and cry together about the same man who had taken so much from both of us. One afternoon I went to the local coffee shop and ran into an old friend I had not seen since before everything happened. She looked at me and said, I can see it in your eyes, you are different, stronger. And I realized she was right. I had changed in ways I never thought possible. I was no longer waiting for Mark to call. I was no longer living in the shadow of lies. I had learned how to protect my heart and how to create a life that was honest and real. As summer turned to fall, we started making new family traditions: Friday night board games, Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon walks, and sometimes just sitting together in the living room reading quietly. The kids laughed more, and so did I. I realized that sometimes the most painful chapters in your life teach you the greatest lessons about who you are and what you truly deserve. By the time the leaves started turning red and gold that fall, I could feel a quiet strength growing inside me. I was no longer defined by the betrayal or the nights I cried alone. I was defined by the way I picked myself up and how I held my children close even when everything inside me ached. Katie started performing in the school plays again and asked me to help her rehearse lines in the living room. Ryan joined a soccer league and ran across the field with the biggest smile on his face. I sat on the bleachers one Saturday watching him and felt a warmth in my chest I had not felt in years, a mix of pride and relief and gratitude that we were still together. I started inviting neighbors over for small dinners. Sometimes we would sit in the living room talking about life and work and the little dramas of our small town. It felt normal and safe, and I realized that I had not felt that way for a very long time. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the stars appear in the sky above me. The world was quiet, and for the first time in a long time I felt at peace. I thought about the life I had lost and the pain I had endured, and I realized that I was stronger than I had ever imagined. Michelle sent me a picture of her new apartment and her dog sleeping on the couch. She wrote that she finally felt free, and that she was learning to trust herself again. I smiled at her words, and typed back that I understood exactly how she felt, because I too had learned to trust my own heart again. Mark sent a message around Thanksgiving, saying he missed the kids and wanted to see them. He wrote long apologies and promises of change, but I did not feel the panic or longing that I might have felt before. Instead, I felt clarity. I replied kindly but firmly that we were moving forward, and that our life was now focused on honesty, love, and peace. Katie looked up at me that night and said, "Mom, do you think everything bad that happened made us stronger?" I held her hand and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, sometimes the hardest things teach you the most important lessons." I began noticing more moments of quiet happiness. I noticed the smell of cookies baking in the oven, the way Ryan would hug me without asking, the way Katie would leave little notes in my room telling me she loved me, the laughter echoing through the house on Saturday mornings. These were the victories. These were the signs of life moving forward. The winter came and we had our first small Christmas in the new apartment. It was not the grand holidays we had before, but it was ours. I wrapped gifts with the kids, and we made hot chocolate and watched Christmas movies. We laughed and sang along to songs, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. I realized that life does not always turn out the way you expect, but it can still be beautiful. You can rebuild from betrayal. You can find joy after heartbreak. You can love again, starting with yourself and your family. By the time the new year came, I felt like a different person. The woman who had believed every promise from Mark was gone, replaced by a woman who trusted her instincts, who held her children close, and who knew that happiness could be found in honesty and resilience. Sometimes, I would sit quietly at night and think about the past, the hurt, the lies, the nights of endless crying, but instead of letting it control me, I let it remind me how strong I had become, how love, even when broken, had taught me to protect myself, how betrayal had taught me to value truth, how loss had taught me to treasure what truly mattered. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what happened in the future, I would face it with courage, honesty, and the unwavering knowledge that sometimes losing someone is the only way to finally find yourself. Our life was no longer perfect, but it was ours, real and true, built from the ashes of pain into something stronger than I ever imagined. Spring came the next year, and with it came new rhythms to our lives. The mornings smelled like dew on freshly mowed lawns, and the kids would run down the street to meet their friends before school, backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. I would sit on the porch with my coffee, listening to the world waking up, and feel a sense of calm that had been missing for years. It wasn't the kind of happiness that burst suddenly. It was quiet, steady, and it made me feel alive again. Katie had joined the school choir, and would sing in the evenings at home, practicing songs she had memorized for weeks. Ryan took to drawing more seriously, filling sketchbooks with superheroes, landscapes, and little cartoons of our family. I found myself admiring his imagination, laughing at the silly ones, and feeling proud of the serious ones. These moments reminded me that even though life had torn us apart, we were capable of creating joy out of the smallest things. I also started meeting new people in town. A woman named Sharon, whose kids went to the same school as mine, invited me to a book club. I hesitated at first. Social situations had felt impossible after the betrayal, but I agreed. Sitting around a table with other women sharing stories, worries, and laughs reminded me that life had so many chapters beyond the heartbreak I had endured. I could have a life filled with connection, support, and laughter. One evening, Michael tried reaching out again. He sent a long message, full of apologies, promises, and pleading to see the kids. My chest tightened for a moment, a reflex from old pain, but I did not respond immediately. I held the phone, feeling the familiar surge of hurt, and then I thought about the nights I had spent crying in silence, the mornings I had woken up exhausted from worry, the children I had comforted through sleepless nights. I realized that replying would not heal the past or rebuild trust. I typed a simple, firm message telling him that our family was moving forward, and that we were focused on honesty, love, and building peace. Katie overheard me typing and asked, "Mom, are we really okay now?" I looked at her and smiled, feeling a warmth I had not known in years. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "We're okay. Stronger than ever, in fact." As summer approached, I decided to take the kids on a small trip to a nearby lake. It was nothing fancy, just a rented cabin with a little dock, but for the first time in years, I felt the kind of freedom I hadn't known since the betrayal. We spent mornings fishing, afternoons swimming, and evenings sitting on the dock, watching the sun melt into the horizon. Katie sang quietly while skipping stones. Ryan laughed until his cheeks hurt, and I felt tears in my eyes, not from pain, but from the pure relief of being together, safe and whole. I began journaling more frequently, not about the heartbreak, but about the small victories, the laughter, the sunsets, the kids' milestones, the friends I had made, the quiet moments of reflection. Each page reminded me how far I had come, how strong I had become, and how capable I was of creating a life that felt real and beautiful. By the time autumn rolled around again, our home was filled with warmth. We celebrated birthdays and holidays with traditions we had made ourselves. The house smelled of cinnamon and baked apples, and the children's laughter echoed through the rooms. For the first time, I realized that the betrayal and pain I had endured had not destroyed us. Instead, it had taught me to value truth, to treasure real love, to protect my heart, and to build a life worth living even in the face of loss. I understood finally that life would always have challenges and unexpected turns, but I was no longer afraid. I had learned to rely on myself, to find strength in honesty, and to cherish the moments that mattered most. The past no longer defined me. It had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and capable of true happiness. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most teach us the lessons we need to survive. Sometimes, losing someone we love is the only way to finally find ourselves. And sometimes the quiet moments, the sun on your face, your child's laughter, the smell of fresh coffee, are the most powerful reminders that life goes on, and that we are capable of being whole again. I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sky darken and stars begin to twinkle, feeling a sense of peace I had never imagined possible. Our life was no longer perfect, but it was ours, real and true, built from the ashes of heartbreak into something stronger, something lasting, and something filled with love. Winter came quietly that year, with frost on the windows and a soft white blanket covering the small town. The kids were excited for the season, and for the first time, I felt excited too. I watched them bundle up in their coats, scarves, and mittens, running outside to build snowmen and throw snowballs. Ryan laughed so hard he fell into the snow, and Katie helped him up, brushing powder from his hair, both of them smiling with joy that felt contagious. I stood at the porch, sipping hot cocoa, and felt a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The kind of contentment that comes not from grand moments but from simple, shared happiness. I continued volunteering at the school library, now feeling fully confident in my role, and even helping organize small reading events for the children. I noticed the quiet strength I had gained, how easily I could now talk to other parents about challenges without fear, how I could hold a conversation with a sense of calm I didn't have before. I started seeing the difference in myself, not just surviving, but truly living. Katie and Ryan started talking about their future more openly. Katie wanted to audition for a bigger school play next year, and Ryan wanted to join a regional art contest. I encouraged them, reminded them to dream big, and reminded myself to allow my own dreams too. The shadow of Mark's betrayal no longer held me back. One snowy evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat by the fireplace reflecting on the past few years. The pain, the betrayal, the nights of crying alone, the silence that had once been unbearable. All of it felt like a part of my story but no longer the definition of it. I had grown, rebuilt, and learned what true resilience meant. I realized how deeply the experience had reshaped my understanding of love, trust, and self-worth. Mark tried reaching out again during the holidays, sending a long, apologetic message, but I no longer felt panic, fear, or longing. Instead, I felt clarity and calm. I replied briefly, letting him know we were building our life without him, that our focus was on honesty, love, and the children's well-being. My heart did not ache. It was firm, steady, and sure of the path I had chosen. The next months were filled with quiet growth. I decorated the house with holiday lights and small handmade decorations with the kids. We went to the local Christmas parade and sipped cocoa while laughing at the silly floats. I watched them hold hands and realized that despite everything, our bond had grown stronger. The children had not only survived the heartbreak, but had flourished in our new life. One evening, Katie came up to me and whispered, "Mom, I think you're the strongest person I know." I knelt down, hugged her tightly and told her, "No, sweetheart. We're strong together. But I want you to know, it's okay to be scared, to cry, and to fall. What matters is that we keep getting back up." Ryan ran in with a drawing of our family in the snow. On the paper, our little house, the trees, the kids, and me were smiling under a bright yellow sun. I held it to my chest, overwhelmed with gratitude. The picture symbolized what we had survived and what we had built. A life filled with honesty, love, and resilience. By spring, our routines were firmly established. We celebrated small victories. First art contest ribbons, school awards, completed projects, new friendships. I noticed how my own confidence had grown. I spoke up at parent meetings, volunteered for community events, and even started thinking about pursuing part-time courses online to expand my skills. I realized I was capable of dreams I had shelved years ago. Sometimes at night, I would sit on the porch, listening to the crickets and the distant hum of cars on Main Street. I would think about the years lost, the betrayal, and the pain, but I no longer felt bitterness or despair. Instead, I felt clarity. I had survived, I had grown, and I had built a life that was real, full, and meaningful. The lessons I had learned were profound. Love must be built on honesty. Trust is fragile but reparable when nurtured correctly, and self-respect is the foundation for any relationship, including the one with yourself. The betrayal had been excruciating, but it had forced me to find strength I didn't know I had and to recognize the power of resilience, of self-love, and of focusing on what truly matters, my children and the life we created together. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most teach the lessons we never expected to learn. Sometimes losing someone is not a tragedy. It is the beginning of discovering who we are, who we can become, and what kind of life we are capable of building for ourselves. As the years passed, the home became filled with laughter, love, and small victories. Our family dinners became traditions. Weekend walks became adventures, and the quiet moments of sitting together reading, talking, or simply enjoying one another's presence became treasures. Our life was no longer perfect, but it was ours, built from the ashes of pain into something strong, true, and beautiful. And I knew without a doubt that no betrayal, no lie, no heartbreak could ever take that away from us again. We had survived and we were finally free. Summer arrived again, bringing long, golden evenings that seemed to stretch forever. The kids spent hours outside, running through sprinklers and chasing neighborhood friends down the sidewalks. I would watch them from the porch, a glass of iced tea in my hand, and marvel at how alive our little world felt. It was simple, but it was ours. Every laugh, every scraped knee, every shouted name across the street reminded me that life was moving forward, and we were moving with it. Katie had started writing short stories and keeping a small notebook under her pillow. She asked me to read them, and I saw glimpses of her imagination, her humor, and her kindness shining through. Ryan had taken to learning how to ride his bike without training wheels, and each time he pedaled past me with a triumphant grin, I felt a small surge of pride and relief. We were thriving, despite the chaos of the past. I continued volunteering at the school library, and even started helping organize a small summer reading program. The kids joined in sometimes, helping younger students pick books or reading aloud under the shade of the big oak tree in the playground. It amazed me how far we had come, from the nights of tears and broken trust to days filled with purpose, laughter, and connection. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, Katie said, "Mom, I think we're happy now." Her words made my chest swell. I nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. We are. And it's because we chose each other every day." Ryan crawled up beside us, wrapping his small arms around my waist, and I realized that happiness didn't have to be big or loud. It could be quiet and steady, like the pulse of life itself. Mark never returned. He tried sending messages a few times, but each one was met with calm clarity. We had our life now, and it did not include him. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt like the protective shield we had built around our hearts. Every day we built something stronger, layer by layer, from the lessons betrayal had forced upon us. As autumn approached, I began teaching Katie and Ryan about gratitude, not just saying thank you for presents or meals, but noticing the little things that made life meaningful. The smell of fresh bread at the bakery, the laughter of a neighbor, the quiet moments before the world wakes up. I wanted them to see that even after pain, life could be beautiful if we chose to see it that way. I also started noticing myself in new ways. I was calmer, stronger, and more confident. I spoke up when I needed to, set boundaries when required, and allowed myself to enjoy moments without guilt or fear. I laughed more freely, slept more peacefully, and woke up with a sense of purpose. The betrayal that had once felt like a trap was now a catalyst for my own growth. By winter, our home had a small tree in the corner of the living room, lights twinkling faintly, and stockings hung with care. Katie and Ryan decorated the tree with handmade ornaments. We baked cookies together, our hands sticky with sugar, our laughter filling the rooms. That Christmas felt unlike any other. It was quiet, honest, and ours. The past could not touch the warmth we had built together. One night, as the kids slept, I sat by the window, looking out at the snow-covered streets. I thought about the years lost, the pain endured, and the nights I thought I would never breathe again. But I had breathed, and I was stronger for it. I had built a life that could withstand betrayal, a life full of love, laughter, and quiet victories. I realized that life is not about the people who hurt you. It is about how you rise from the pain. It is about the love you nurture, the family you protect, and the choices you make to live truthfully and fiercely. And in that moment, looking at the falling snow and hearing the quiet hum of my children's breaths upstairs, I knew that we had not only survived, we had found ourselves. Sometimes, the people who hurt us teach the hardest lessons, and sometimes, losing someone is the only way to discover how strong, capable, and alive we really are. Our story was no longer one of betrayal. It was one of resilience, love, and the quiet, unshakable power of a family who chose each other against all odds. We were no longer perfect, but we were real. And in that reality, we were finally free. Spring arrived again, and with it came new beginnings. The air smelled fresh with blooming flowers and warm rain, and the town felt alive with movement. Neighbors mowing lawns, kids laughing on bicycles, the distant hum of cars passing on Main Street. Katie and Ryan ran through the yard, their laughter echoing between the houses, and I found myself smiling for no reason other than the simple joy of watching them play. Life felt steady, safe, and full again. Katie had started writing a small collection of stories in a notebook she kept hidden under her pillow. One evening, she brought it to me and read a story about a girl who overcame great obstacles to protect her family. I felt a lump in my throat as I realized she was channeling her own experiences, and I hugged her tightly. "You are brave," I whispered. "Just like your mom." Ryan ran over and showed me a drawing he made of our family holding hands, smiling in front of our house. In those small moments, I felt the weight of the past lift just a little more. I continued volunteering at the school library, and the experience became more than just giving back. It became a source of strength, helping kids find books, organizing story hours, and seeing their excitement reminded me that life could be full of purpose and joy again. Even the small connections with parents and teachers gave me a renewed sense of community and belonging. On weekends, we would go on small trips, picnics at the lake, hikes through the nearby woods, and visits to the town's small fair. These excursions became our new family rituals. The kids would run ahead, shouting and laughing, and I would walk behind, breathing in the fresh air and realizing how much I had healed. I no longer feared the quiet moments. I welcomed them as opportunities to reflect, to breathe, and to simply exist in peace. One evening, Mark tried reaching out once more. A message appeared on my phone, long and filled with apologies and pleas. I felt the old pang of uncertainty, the brief flicker of old hurt, but it passed quickly. I replied firmly and calmly, letting him know that we were moving forward without him. My life belonged to me now, to my children and to the home we had rebuilt together. Katie asked me later that night if I thought we would ever be happy forever. I smiled at her and said, "Happiness is something you create every day. Sometimes it's big, and sometimes it's quiet. But it's always possible if you choose it." Ryan nodded, as if he understood more than I realized. The months rolled into seasons, each one marking small victories. Katie won a school writing contest, Ryan scored his first goal in soccer, And our family grew closer with each shared meal, each shared laugh, each story told at bedtime. I began to feel a sense of pride not just in surviving, but in thriving. I started journaling more consistently, capturing the little moments, the smell of fresh bread at the bakery, the quiet hum of the fridge, the way my children's laughter filled the rooms. These entries became reminders of resilience, of life moving forward, of the strength I had found inside myself. By the next winter, our home was decorated for the holidays, modest but full of love. We baked cookies, sang songs, and created traditions that were ours alone. The pain of betrayal no longer haunted our home. Instead, it had been transformed into a foundation for growth, love, and connection. I understood, finally, that life is not defined by the people who hurt us, but by the choices we make to rise above the pain. I had learned that love must be built on honesty, that self-respect is essential, and that sometimes losing someone is not an ending but a beginning, a chance to discover strength, resilience, and the true meaning of family. Our life was not perfect, but it was ours. Real, authentic, and full of love. And for the first time in many years, I felt completely free. The following spring, life felt lighter in ways I could not have imagined years ago. The kids ran through our yard with the energy only children possess, their laughter carrying across the quiet streets of our small town. I watched them from the porch, the sunlight catching Katie's hair and Ryan's freckled cheeks, and realized how much had changed. We had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and years of uncertainty, and yet here we were, building something stronger than before. Katie was thriving at school. She joined the school choir and started performing in small plays, asking me to help her rehearse at home. I could see her confidence growing, and it made my heart swell with pride. Ryan had taken up drawing in earnest, filling notebook after notebook with sketches of superheroes, our home, and little cartoons of our family. These innocent creations reminded me daily that life could still be beautiful, even after the deepest wounds. Our weekends were filled with simple traditions. Picnics at the lake, board games in the living room, walks through the neighborhood, and small adventures exploring nearby towns. Every shared laugh, every hug, every quiet moment became a thread in the fabric of our new life. I found joy in routine, in the ordinary, and in the little victories that had once seemed impossible. Mark never returned. His messages had ceased, and while a part of me once would have panicked at silence, now I felt peace. I had reclaimed my life, and our family had flourished without him. The past, while painful, had taught me invaluable lessons. To trust my instincts, to value honesty above all else, and to recognize that self-respect is the foundation for every meaningful relationship. One quiet evening, I sat on the porch, the sky painted with shades of orange and purple, and thought about the years of heartbreak. The nights I had cried alone, the days I had felt invisible, and the endless waiting for someone who had chosen deceit. And yet, I realized that every tear, every moment of pain, had led me to a place of clarity, strength, and freedom. Katie came running to me, her notebook clutched in her hands. She had written a story about a family who faced betrayal, but learned to trust each other and themselves. I hugged her tightly and whispered, "We are that family, sweetheart. Stronger than ever." Ryan joined us, wrapping his arms around both of us, and I felt an overwhelming sense of completeness. I understood finally that life is not measured by the people who hurt us, but by how we rise after their betrayal. We had rebuilt, we had healed, and we had created a life filled with love, laughter, and authenticity. The past no longer controlled us. It had shaped us, strengthened us, and shown us the meaning of resilience. Our life was not perfect, but it was real. And in that reality, we were truly free, free to love, free to laugh, free to grow, and free to embrace every moment together as a family who had endured the impossible and come out stronger on the other side. Sometimes losing someone you love is the only way to find yourself. Sometimes heartbreak teaches the most valuable lessons. And sometimes in the quiet of a small town, on a porch watching your children play, you realize that peace, love, and freedom are worth every tear you've ever shed. Our story was no longer about betrayal. It was about survival, growth, and the enduring power of family.